Well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all keeping well, and thank you very much for joining us for the Preparing to Deliver the Level 3 Qualification in Plant Operations webinar. We're presenting this webinar from home, so please excuse any unwanted background noise or any delay in the slide. Following the webinar, you will receive an email with a copy of the PowerPoint, the recording of this webinar, and a certificate of attendance after this webinar. You can access recordings to all previous webinars and register for upcoming webinars on our own Skills for Wales website. You will receive an email with a link to a survey, which will also drop in the chat box. We will be very grateful if you could take the time to fill in this survey, as your feedback is very valuable to us. So let's move on and have a look at what we'll be discussing this afternoon. Thank you. So we will be briefly mentioning wireless transformation. We will look at the content of the Level 3 qualification, structure of unit, summary of assessment, the employer confirmation guide. We'll also show some learning resources. We will discuss some next steps with you, and then there'll be an opportunity to ask any questions. As we present this presentation, please type in any questions you may have in the Questions tab on the right-hand side of your screen. So moving on to the introductions, myself, Gwaith Peiriannau, Technical Advisor and Technical Advisor for Building Services Engineering. I'm joined by my colleagues Jason Howe, Technical Advisor for Construction, and Ian Roberts, Technical Advisor for Construction. And Harry Lloyd-Benyon isn't available today, but has helped put together much of this content. So let's have a look at why the transformation. In February 2018, Qualifications Wales published the Building the Future report, which was a sector review of the qualifications and the qualification system in construction and built environment in Wales. Some of the Qualifications Wales outline findings were like inconsistent assessment practice, some areas of learning not effectively assessed, learners needed to deal with a range of tasks and to be able to problem solve, qualifications weren't meeting skills needs of Wales, there was a need to reduce the complexity of the system, there was also a need to improve coherence with clear pathways, progression routes needed to be clear throughout the framework and onto higher education. Thank you. Should we go to the next slide, please? On this slide, you can see many of the questions that you may already have. I won't go through this slide line by line, but as I mentioned earlier, you will be receiving a copy of this presentation. So this is a useful slide to go back to if you'd like to investigate any of those FAQs. On the next slide, this shows possible learner journeys with the different options for a learner. Excuse me. So we have a learner coming in at foundation level and progressing onto the apprenticeship, which is the Level 3 qualification we will be discussing today. A learner may start on the foundation. If they don't get suitable employment, they will go to the progression qualification and then on to the apprenticeship Level 3. You may not think it's suitable for a learner to start at foundation level, in which case you may run what is suggested to be a broad-based Level 1 qualification, move on to the foundation and then the apprenticeship. Or the fourth line there, a learner is not successful gaining employment straight away, they could do a broad Level 1 foundation, the progression, and then move into the apprenticeship following that learner journey. Alternatively, a learner has employment in the industry, they can go straight on to an apprenticeship, they will do the Level 3 qualification plus a core qualification. The core qualification mirrors the foundation qualification, but with just one trade unit rather than the two. And that one trade unit would link into the apprenticeship they're doing. Some examples of broad-based level 1 qualifications would be the 6219 or the 7201 qualifications. Thank you. So now I would like to pass you over to my colleague Jason, who'll take you through the next few slides. Thank you, Jason.
Thanks, David. Yes, good afternoon, everybody. We are now going to have a look at the qualification content and look at how the units are structured within the qualification handbook as well. Next slide, please. So just a bit of a recap and just to outline some of the qualifications that have come before the level 3s. We have the foundation and the core, which David has covered in previous slides, and those cover construction, plant operations and BSE, and similarly the pre-foundation or the level 1 qualifications that David has just alluded to also. Following on from that, we have the progression qualifications. Again, these are with construction, and that responsibility sits with us at City and Guilds with our BSE qualifications with EAL. Following on from that is the level 3 qualifications that sit as part of the apprenticeship, and for the purpose of today, we've highlighted the plant operations qualification at level 3, but you can see the other construction pathways within the level 3 qualifications also. Next slide, please. So just with regards to some rules of combination, apologies that it's not covered in Welsh on this slide, but hopefully you know, you can get the gist of it from obviously the rules of combination that are in English. So we have the 6 common core units, which is units 301 to 306. And those are the same common core units across all of the level 3 qualification construction pathways. Then you have your trade specific pathways. And for the purpose of this, obviously we're looking at plant operations, and that has contained within it 5 units. Within this qualification, there are 3 assessment methods, and learners must achieve at least a pass grade or higher in each one of those assessment methods, and we'll cover those a little bit later in the presentation. For the purpose of this qualification, there are 722 guided learning hours attached, and that includes 37 hours for assessment. And just to note that the guided learning hours can be delivered either within the training provider's environment or within their industry set. Thank you, Ian. So these are the core common unit numbers, titles and GLH. And again, these are the same across each one of the level 3 construction qualifications. So on the slide there, we have the unit number, the unit title and the aligned GLH. And the guided learning hours aligned with each unit are specific to the content and criteria within each unit also. So, you know, they are bespoke, and it does allow for sufficient time for delivery. As we move it on, please. So these are the trade units, if you like, for plant operations. So we do have the common core units, as we mentioned previously, unit 301 to 306. And that's followed then by the 5 trade units. The first 4 are sort of generic, and you know, no matter which pathway people do, they will complete each one of those 4 units. And then there is an option of either 1 of 2 units, but you know, it is still mandatory, either unit 331 or 332. And between yourself as a provider, the employer and the learner, you would decide which unit is more appropriate to your learner. Again, we have the 37 hours for assessment, and we have a grand total of 722 GLH. So just to have a little look at the unit structure now. Thank you. So just a quick recap, really, looking at the highlight titles. So we have learning outcomes, and those are groups of chunked together knowledge and practical skills that learners must be able to understand or do and be delivered as part of teaching and learning. Following that, we have the assessment criteria, and that just takes the learning outcomes and breaks them down into a little bit more detail. But the assessment criteria are specific to what will be assessed in line with that learning outcome. And then following that, we will have the range, and that follows every assessment criteria. And that just breaks down the assessment criteria, covering what breadth is required for delivery. Those 3 elements are pretty standardized and pretty generic across the City and Guilds construction qualification handbook, so they should be fairly familiar to you. Thank you, Ian. Looking at an actual unit now, so we're just picking on a unit here, which is Unit 301, Understanding Construction Practices in Wales. So we have the unit number and title at the beginning, followed by the GLH, and then we have a brief description of what the unit's about. Now, this description can be used to introduce the content to the learners, give them an overview of what's going to be covered within that unit, so they have a full understanding of what the course and qualification is about. After the brief description, then you move into the actual unit content and the learning outcomes as showcased on the bottom of the screen. Thank you, Ian. As the qualification handbook moves through and we look more detailed units, again, you have the learning outcome number and title at the top there, followed by the criteria or assessment criteria, most commonly known, and then you have the range. After that is something new that's has been included in as an addition to our qualification handbooks is our delivery outcome. And the delivery outcome basically covers the depth of the content. So it takes the criteria in the range and breaks that information down in a little bit more detail to give the tutors and deliverers, more content with regards to exactly what has to be covered as part of the delivery. And hopefully this is useful when setting up, high-level curriculum delivery models, or looking at how many lessons need to be taught for that content, or included in lesson plans or schemes of learning, whatever is necessary to support that tutor in the delivery. Next slide, please. We're now just having a quick look at one of the trade units, and for this, obviously, we've picked Unit 237. Again, you have the unit number and title. This is a fairly standardized format as showcased with the previous unit, followed by the GLH, and then we have the brief description. And again, those can be used to give learners and employees as well a good understanding of what is being covered within the qualification specific units. Again, this is then followed by the learning outcomes. As we move on from the learning outcomes, thank you. Again, we have the criteria and the range. So we have this standardized flow and format within the qualification handbook. What is slightly different on here is the delivery outcome again. This one is in more of a bullet point format, and the way these are structured and formatted is in line with the content and the specific information that they're trying to get across. So again, just showcasing the differentiation of how this information is laid out. Again, aligning itself to support tutors and teachers and assessors with the delivery of the criteria contained within this qualification. And hopefully, that supports the tutors as they deliver this qualification to the apprentices and learners. I'll now like to hand you over to my colleague Ian Roberts, who is now going to take you through the summary of assessments. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to commence by going through the summary of assessments, as Jason previously mentioned. All right, and for the Plant Operations Level 3 qualification, this is assessed using 3 methods of assessment. The first one is the on-screen assessment, which is multiple choice questions, which is externally set and externally marked. And this has an overall qualification weighting of 20%. You can also see that this will include 2 tests, Test 1 and Test 2, which I will come back to. The practical project covering the trade area that they are working towards, this is carried out within industry, and it's set in agreement with the employer and assessed by the assessor who's employed by the training provider. This will then be externally quality assured and has an overall weighting of 60%. The professional discussion now is a new method of assessment, and this is one externally set and an externally marked by a trade-specific member of the awarding organisation, and has an overall weighting of the qualification of 20%. And that trade-specific person will be specific to plant operations. We will be going through each method of assessment in the up and coming slides. But before we move on, I would like to reinforce, and please do take an opportunity when you have a moment to see, because we have an assessment pack detailing the requirements of the assessments that can be downloaded from the Skills for Wales website. And by clicking on that link there, when you get the presentation, or copying it and moving it across, you will be able to gain access to the website itself. So, within this slide, I'd like to go through in more depth each method of assessment. So the on-screen assessment, as we've said, contains two tests, Test 1 and Test 2, and can be taken any stage in the assessment process. Although this is on demand and completed at any time, it is advisable to complete prior to the professional discussion. Test 1 contains 22 questions, and the learner will have 35 minutes to complete. And Test 2 is completed in their final year and has 44 questions and a timing of 70 minutes. So the learner will have 70 minutes to complete that particular test, which is Test 2. The practical project is made up of 3 elements, which is very similar to what we have in the foundation and progression qualifications. It contains the planning, performing, and evaluating are the 3 elements. The project is carried out in the realistic working environment. They can select from a number of tasks that are outlined within the assessment pack and cannot exceed any more than 4 work-based tasks as we work through that. Assessor employed by the training provider will carry out the assessment visits, which will include a minimum of 3 visits. And their visits must purely focus on the practical project that the learner is working towards completing. The professional discussion will be carried out by a member of the awarding organisation and will be an occupational competent person as well. This will be carried out in a one-time sitting and can be either virtual or face-to-face. The professional discussion will last no more than 40 minutes and will be graded pass to distinction. The learner will need to demonstrate their knowledge, understanding, and performance from the occupational standards relevant to their trade. And in this instance, it will be relevant to each category of plant that they will be operating and working towards. They will also be required to reflect on the practical project they have completed within their discussion. So the learners will be able to have the relevant material of the planning, the evaluating, as well as performing to be able to go with them to carry out that professional discussion. And your final reminder is that the professional discussion can only take place once the learner has completed their project and the employer confirmation, which we will go through shortly. Excuse me. The online assessments will contain engaging multiple choice question types and styles and will all be online, with the results received immediately after the assessment. Initially, we will still require a cohort of learners to go through before we can actually set the benchmark. Because on this table, as you can see, it is for a sample test only that's currently on the Skills for Wales website for people to see. Test 1, it may have been achieved previously if the learner successfully completed their progression qualification within the same trade area. But in this instance, that will not be the case because there is not a plant operations within the progression qualification. Here you can see on the right of the slide assessment information for the sample test 2. 44 questions, and they would require a minimum of 29 correct responses to attain a pass. Like I've said, this is only for the sample test. What will actually happen is, now this has gone live, we will still need a certain number of cohort of learners to have sampled this, and it may take up to 20 days before the learner will actually achieve notification whether they've passed, got a merit or a distinction, or unfortunately failed. This is so we can then set the benchmark accordingly to be able to move that forward. But following that, and as soon as the benchmark is set, then the learners will receive the results and whether it's a pass, merit or distinction before they leave the actual assessment process. We are now going to cover in more detail the practical project. For the plant operations, a learner will have 12 hours to complete all of their planning, and this may include up to the 4 work-based projects. They then have 10 hours to complete the performing, and then 12 hours to complete the evaluation of the tasks that they have included within their project. Just another gentle reminder that the project cannot include any more than 4 work-based activities. That would cover the various categories of plant that the learner will have to work upon. And previous information, as I've already mentioned, can be located on the Skills for Wales website. That's in the practical project section of the assessment pack. With regards to the professional discussion, we fully understand this is a new method of assessment for all. But here you can see a brief overview of the content and the timings. The units we have identified, along with the learner reflection on the practical project, this should help you in supporting the learner in being prepared to meet the external assessor. The only time the learner will meet the external assessor is when they are ready to commence their professional discussion. So it is crucial that the learner is comfortable in what's going to be happening. The project documentation can be available during the professional discussion to help the learner make reference to. And as you can see, the discussion will have to be recorded and captured in a secure GDPR compliant way. Once again, before we do move on, I'd just like to reinforce that the professional discussion will be conducted by a competent external assessor. You should be all aware by now that there is no NVQ within the Level 3 qualification. Learners, however, still have to gain skills and knowledge within industry to carry out and fulfill their role within the construction industry itself. Within this slide, we make reference to the employer confirmation and how this will help support the learner in meeting the qualification requirements and attaining their CPCS card. The guide which I will go through provides guidance to employers and training providers on how the occupational competency statements set by industry have been met. This document, when completed, will provide employers, federations and industry the confidence that the learner has provided evidence of meeting the occupational competency statements. The overall qualification will be graded, pass, merit or distinction to help differentiate the achievement between learners. Provisional grades for the practical project will undergo internal and external quality assurance. And during the professional discussion, the external assessor will confirm the grade that's been awarded. And then the overall final grade for the certificate will be issued by City and Guilds. Learners can resit assessments or make a resubmission when the learner fails to achieve a pass grade in any of the assessments. Guidance on the resits, etc. can be found on the assessment pack, although we will be touching on this in the next slide up and coming, as you can see in a moment. This is a brief overview of the resit and the resubmissions. Taking the on-screen assessment, although there are no limits to the number of times a learner can take, you should ensure and provide additional learning prior to a retake. When a retake is taken, the learner can still achieve the full marks and grades available. If any resits are required, then additional costs will be charged, and you'll have to rebook through the walled garden. So it is crucial that you make sure that the learner is prepared and ready before you make them sit the on-screen assessments. The practical project, here you can see the opportunities, and rather than having to resit the entire project, they can retake the criteria that they fail. For example, regarding the planning, if they do not meet the threshold pass, then they can resubmit the criteria that they failed will be reassessed within the resubmission. And finally, the professional discussion. When a learner fails to successfully achieve, then they are permitted to resit and must resit the whole professional discussion. And again, there will be a charge for this, and this must be booked through Walled Garden, which is an online system. Before I begin the employee confirmation guide, may I take this opportunity to say thank you to all stakeholders, and I've no doubt there's some stakeholders today on this webinar, for your valuable contribution and feedback we have received, and that has helped the consortium in shaping what I am about to present. Employer confirmation is part of the learner journey and will help strengthen the relationships between employers, centres and the learner. This is only part of the learner journey, and the process will enhance the employer role in the delivery of the new apprenticeship qualification in the construction and built environment sector. As we are aware, the learner will spend a considerable amount of their time in the realistic working environment. And the purpose of the confirmatory sign-off is to capture the activities and provide stakeholders, including trade bodies, confidence that the learner is occupationally proficient and has covered the full range of the relevant standards to allow the learner to progress to the final part of their assessment process, which is the professional discussion. Although there is no MVQ within the new apprenticeship model, a learner will still provide a range of evidence that allows the centre to check the employer confirmatory sign-off is valid. Upon successful completion of the overall assessment process and the confirmatory sign-off, a learner will then be in a position to attain the relevant skills card. And although it's a level 3 qualification, the learners, upon completing all the assessment methods and the employer confirmatory sign-off, plus obviously to gain the red card as well initially, they will then be able to gain the blue card. We are aware that the employer confirmation process is new and may raise a few concerns. The consortium will provide centres and employers with instructions and the requirements for completing this process within the employer confirmation guide, which will be further communicated at our centre and employer events. We are at this moment in time planning and scheduling when the events will take place. These will be 1-hour webinars at a time to suit employers, ranging from 4 o'clock through to 8 o'clock in the evening. Once we have set them, there will be then opportunities for you to register, and these registration opportunities will be on the Skills for Wales website. But while we'll be sending out our monthly updates, we will then inform you of the link to be able to share with your employers as well. Here we can see how working collaboratively we can support the learner along their journey that they will require to move forward and progress to that final assessment of that assessment process, the professional discussion. As you can see on the slide, by working together, employers, centres will provide opportunities that will allow the learner to gain valuable industrial experience and complete the activities outlined within the employer confirmation guide. Whether it be 1, 2 or 3 employers the learner will work with throughout their apprenticeship, hence the reasons why we have made provisions on the various documents contained in the employer confirmation guide for more than one employer to work on the documents. Excuse me. Work-based learning providers and centres will work with employers to guide and support to ensure the occupational competency statement log is being completed correctly. And as you can see on this slide, the pieces start to come together. And this, as we've mentioned, is through working collaboratively together to ensure the learner journey runs as smooth as it possibly can. As you can imagine, this hasn't been a smooth journey, as change is always and sometimes very difficult to accept. We have engaged with a considerable number of stakeholders, including micro businesses, medium to large contractors, and federations, including colleges and private training providers. Within this slide now, you can see a front page, the contents and a section that is contained within the employer confirmation guide. It is both in English and in Welsh medium language. Whether it be 1, 2 or 3 employers, they will work with the learners throughout their apprenticeship. Hence the reasons why we have made provision on the various forms, which is Form A and B, for more than one employer to work on the documents. The employer confirmation guide will be trade specific and can be located on the Skills for Wales website under its current heading, the Plant Operations Level 3. This document will be in a writable PDF and can be completed either electronically or hard copy. And the employer confirmation is the responsibility of the employer and learner working collaboratively with the learning provider. And the main reasons we've made it available for more than one employer to be able to work on this document is due to what's currently happening in Wales, which is the shared apprenticeship scheme, where learners travel from one employer to another to be able to gain the valuable industrial experience and complete the activities that is required. Although this is not part of the qualification, this has to be completed prior to the learner moving forward to complete the final assessment, and that is the professional discussion. It's thank you for now, and I would now like you to pass you on to David, who will take you through the next set of slides and to the end. Thank you very much for now.
Thank you, Ian, and welcome back, everyone. As we move on, we'll look at some of the resources and we'll work through the final few slides. So our first step to access information will be the Skills for Wales website, and from here you will see under the qualifications tab a list of sectors. Click on your sector and scroll down to the bottom tab titled Qualification Documents. Here you'll find 2 documents, the handbook and secondly the employer confirmatory sign-off. The handbook contains content along with various requirements for the qualification, so it's always the best starting point. You can find various other supporting documents on the website, which covers the qualifications from foundation through to the level 3 qualifications. Please familiarise yourselves with the website and documents. If there are any documents that you're struggling to find, please contact us direct or put it in the questions tab and we'll support finding these documents with you. So as we move on, we'll have a look at the delivery planner. Now, many of you should be familiar with this from previous webinars and from using them to support the delivery of the foundation qualification. The delivery planner is fully adaptable and equally as useful for delivering the level 3 qualifications. Please allow time to consider your delivery and timings, and if you wish to use the document, please feel free to share your thoughts and plans with us if you'd like us to talk them through. Remember, our role is to support you in the delivery of these qualifications, so the more you communicate with us and have those discussions with us, the more we can support. As we move on now, we'll see that, as previously promoted, we have a suite of sector books from Hodder Education. To support the new suite of qualifications, Hodder have created free mapping documents to support staff and learners in accessing related information. Please contact Thomas Stotter direct for more information. His email details are on the screen now. I did speak to Thomas just last week, who did tell me that very, very few centres in Wales or tutors have contacted him, which is a surprise because you can get access to free inspection copies and there's a lot of free resources, and also ask for good deals on things like the textbooks, ebooks. There's also tutor versions of the ebook which you can put on the screen. So there's so much content and support, it would be really useful to be able to access all that help and support. So please do contact Thomas Stotter direct and ask about all this material. Thank you. So now we'll look at some of the next steps. Here you can see centre approval actually commenced in Jan 21 with the foundation and progression, and now closely followed by the level 3 qualification. Provided you haven't already gained centre approval, the following slides will provide a broad overview of the approval journey for centres. The next slide, please, Ian. As we're aware, these are brand new qualifications. An offline application has to be completed, if not already done so, and it's available in the Become a Centre section of the Skills for Wales website for both awarding bodies. On completion, it should be forwarded to skillsforwales.quality@cityandguilds.com. Again, if you want any extra advice on these email addresses, please contact us. But centres can expect a decision on approval within around 30 working days of receipt of the application. Separate approvals must be submitted for sub-centres. Your current IQA documents should be perfectly fine to adapt to meet the requirements of current IQA. So if you already have all your IQA planners and documents, it should easily be adapted to the new qualifications. It shouldn't mean you have to go away and create lots and lots of brand new documents to support this. Thank you, Ian. So here we can see all of our upcoming webinars and supports, and you can see we're almost through all of these now. We are working very hard looking at feedback from recent events, feedback from stakeholders and talking to centres, and we're developing the support for the next 12 to 18 months and how that will look. We'll hopefully be finalising that very soon, so there will be more support coming along very shortly for you to register and engage with. You can find all this information on the training and events page on the Skills for Wales website. And again, keep an eye out on that because there'll be new information going up there soon. Thank you, Ian. So now we've worked through all of the slides. There's been a lot of information there. Hopefully that's given you a lot of information about the delivery of the new qualifications. No doubt you'll have a lot of queries and questions, so please have a think about those now. Start typing those in, and remember, the purpose of these presentations are to support you as providers, give you the answers that you need help with. So the more you ask us, the more we can support. So please do. Any questions whatsoever, it may be a question, maybe feedback, maybe just thoughts that you have on the qualification, anything you'd like to discuss at all, please do let us know and we can talk that through. There are no questions at the moment, so I'm hoping that means you've understand everything about the level 3, fine, and there's no queries. But we have 2 more slides. I think we should probably move on to those. Whilst we wait, I'll give you some final chances to ask those questions. So the feedback does help. We mentioned this earlier. We have put in the links to the feedback and the surveys in the chat, but you also get these automatically. It only takes a couple of minutes. I know it's another survey. We will be asking for them frequently throughout the delivery of new qualifications because we want to gauge your feedback. We want to know how well it's working at your centres, what your pain points and pinch points are. The more we can gather, the more information we have from you, the better we can create our support for you as we move forward with new qualifications. So please do take the time to fill in the survey. And on this very final slide, there's a really important email address. If you think of any questions following this presentation, or maybe in a couple of days, you think, oh, I'll feed this back or I'll share this, please make a note of that email address, skillsforwales.customer@sittingills.com. Any questions at all, please send into that email address. It will be logged and it will go to the most appropriate person to respond. So, whilst we wait for those questions to come in, hopefully, are there any updates from Ian or Jason? Ian, first of all, have you got anything you'd like to add, please?
Yeah, I'd just like to mention, if I may, David, is that we have some up and coming webinars coming up in end of June, beginning of July, and this will be to help people prepare moving forward for the level 3 qualification commencing in September. But what's also crucial as well, we've also got some employee confirmation guides webinars. They'll just be 1 hour long, allowing opportunity for people to answer questions if they so wish. They will be run between the hours of 4 o'clock in the afternoon through to 8 o'clock at the evening to try and help employers valuable time. We understand they're working on sociable hours at times, but give them that opportunity to attend, so we can bring them up to speed as well with what the employer confirmations guide's about. So that's it from me, David. Thank you. And just a brief thank you for attending today.
Thank you very much, Ian. Jason, do you have anything to add?
Again, just to mirror what Ian said, and to thank all attendees today, and thank yourself and Ian for presenting today.
Thank you both. So I don't see any questions coming in, so that's fine. I don't see point in staying on any longer for no questions. Please make a note of the email address and contact us in future. Big thank you to the presenters today, Jason Howe and Ian Roberts, who helped pull together all of these events. And we look forward to seeing you all very soon.